healing is deeply neurological and it is deeply emotional as well. As the nervous system starts regulating itself, these emotional layers often begin to surface. And this can look like grief that feels unexpected, or anxiety that comes in waves, or frustration or irritability. Here's what's actually happening in that moment. The system finally has enough capacity to process something it was previously suppressing. This is not a problem, it's part of the process. Welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and today's episode is an Ask Me Q&A. We're focusing on something a lot of people are navigating right now. I've been looking at questions we've been receiving regarding spring transitions, both physically and emotionally. This time of year, we often see shifting symptoms, fluctuating energy, increased inflammation for some people, and emotional waves that people just didn't see coming. So today I'm going to answer some of the most common questions coming in from the community around how to adjust your protocols for spring, how to pace your treatments, and how to stay consistent when things feel unpredictable. Moreover, we're going to talk about emotional load, things like grief and anxiety, and how these actually affect your healing. So let's dive in. Now, here's my first question here. My symptoms seem to change every week right now. How do I adjust my protocol without constantly second-guessing myself? This is one of the most common questions at the moment. What's happening here is not failure, it is transition. You have to remember that your body is shifting. It's moving out of a dormant winter state and into a more active, metabolically dynamic state. And that can create fluctuations in and of itself. So I suppose here's the key principle to that. Don't chase every symptom shift, okay? Instead of constantly changing your protocol, anchor yourself to some foundational goals. Regulate your nervous system, improve circulation to the areas that need healing and repair, and just support inflammation reduction throughout your body. Keep it focused on the overarching instead of chasing the symptoms in your body. Let your protocol stay consistent for longer than feels intuitive, right? Go a little bit longer than you normally would. I think if you adjust every time something shifts, you're just going to lose the ability to see what is actually working. So think of spring as a time to stabilize through change, not to react to every single signal of the body, because that is going to cause some issues down the line. Okay, my next question. How do I know if I'm doing too much or not enough with my treatments? Well, this is where pacing becomes really critical, because in spring, the body often becomes more responsive, but also more sensitive. So instead of asking yourself, am I doing enough? I think it's important to take a step back and ask, how is my body integrating what I'm doing? There are some signs you'll experience that will be showing you that maybe you're doing too much at once. Increased fatigue after treatment, disrupted sleep, emotional overwhelm, simply feeling wired instead of calm. I think that there are signs that you're in a good range too. I mean, subtle improvements in sleep, slightly better energy over a period of time, reduced reactivity, and even more stability overall, like feeling more stable. I think, this is why you should touch base with your treatment coordinator if you're working with our team, and see what might be going on here, because there are things you can do. There are protocols you can do to counteract some of this overdoing it. But when we receive a lot of intake forms, we will often see a lot of things you want to treat on there. And I know that the hope, right? The ideal scenario is you could just treat all of them and be done quickly. But the reality is that treating all of these things at once is not going to be conducive to safely healing your body. You want to pick and choose. You want to focus on the few things at a time, sometimes even just one thing at a time, and move towards that healing shift. Ultimately, healing is not about intensity, right? It is about integration and making sure you're integrating these things into your protocols properly, and making sure you're following these steps in such a way that doesn't push your body into a state of overwhelm. All right, so this next question here, I feel like I was doing well and now I've taken a step back. How do I stay consistent when progress isn't linear? Yeah, though that is such an important question, isn't it? And honestly, it's one of the most defining moments in someone's healing journey. At least you understand that progress isn't linear. But I think ultimately, this is where a lot of people lose momentum because healing, especially with chronic conditions, it's almost never linear. And I think this is one of the biggest mismatches between expectation and reality because we expect steady improvement, we expect predictable progress, we expect clear cause and effect. And that's even from our perspective, too, as practitioners. These are things we expect. But what we'll often experience is improvement, then some fluctuation, then improvement again, and sometimes even taking a step back, taking a temporary dip. And that can feel like you're going backwards. But the shift is important because what matters is not how you feel day to day. It is the trend over time. And this is what we're always trying to put back in your mind. Do you feel better than when you started? You may have felt amazing, taken a step back, but you're 10 points ahead of where you were before, right? So I think when you zoom out over weeks instead of days, most people are progressing. It just doesn't feel like it in the moment, right? It's like time passing by and we don't recognize these things are changing. Consistency doesn't mean doing everything perfectly. It means returning to your baseline plan, even when things feel off, even when your symptoms shift and your energy drops, or if you feel discouraged, because ultimately, if you stop every time there is a fluctuation, you just reset your progress over and over and over again. And here's a really important point too. Sometimes what looks like a setback is actually your system recalibrating. Your body might be reorganizing patterns or processing the inflammation or adjusting to a new baseline or just shifting how it responds to stress. It's making changes. It's changing itself to reorient towards a healthier you. So instead of asking the question like, why am I going backwards, right? What's going on? Just ask instead, like, is my system adapting? Because when you think about it that way, when you put it in that perspective, that question changes almost everything. So just stay steady, stay consistent, let the trend reveal itself, right? That is the important point here. Okay, so hopefully that answers that one. Next question here is, why do I feel more emotional lately? Is that part of healing? Yes, it is. And this catches a lot of people off guard because we tend to think of healing as physical, but healing is deeply neurological and it is deeply emotional as well. As the nervous system starts regulating itself, especially if it's been in a chronic stress or survival state, these emotional layers often begin to surface. And this can look like grief that feels unexpected, or anxiety that comes in waves, or frustration or irritability, or even memories or emotional patterns that you thought you had already processed coming back up. And so I guess naturally the reaction is, why is this happening now? Why do I feel so crummy again? I thought I was getting better, right? What's wrong with me? But here's what's actually happening in that moment. The system finally has enough capacity to process something it was previously suppressing. You have to remember, right? We talk about fight or flight all the time. When the body is overwhelmed, it prioritizes survival. It doesn't process, okay? It doesn't have that capacity to do so. Instead, it stores. So as things begin to regulate, that stored emotional load can start to move. This is not a problem, it's part of the process. And I think where people get stuck is they're trying to fix the emotion. They try and push it away or get rid of it quickly. And instead, what we want to do is to allow it to exist, observe it, support the nervous system through it. And this is where simple tools are incredibly powerful because even slow breathing or gentle movement or quiet time can be huge. Add in the power of something like vagus nerve stimulation, and you have the ability to really help your system move through these traumas. If you're using one of our professional devices, I'm not sure who asked the question of what device they have, But if you're using one of our professional devices, you can even turn to the chakra modes as well, or meridians for emotions. These things don't remove the emotion, though, right? That's the thing. You don't want that. They help your system process it. And the key takeaway is that emotional processing is not separate from physical healing. It's part of it. It is going to go together. We see this with scar tissue too. Even just clearing scar tissue can release emotions. And when the nervous system clears emotional load, it reduces inflammation, it reduces tension, it reduces reactivity, and your overall stress levels go down. So if you're feeling more emotional, it doesn't mean that you are off track. It often means you're going deeper into the healing process. Next question. How do I balance emotional stress with staying on my protocol? Okay, so I think this is where people need to shift perspective in a really important way because most people seem to think that their protocol is like a checklist. I have to do all of these things, I have to complete all of these steps. But your protocol is not just what you do, it's how you support your system as well. And when emotional stress goes up, whether that's grief or anxiety or just life transitions, seasonal transitions can be stressful. The body needs change, right? In these moments, the nervous system becomes the priority. So instead of asking, how do I stay on my protocol no matter what? I've got to stay on this, even if it kills me. Ask instead, like, how can I adapt my protocol to support what my body is going through now? Because pushing through emotional stress with high intensity often backfires. It can lead to fatigue, it can lead to inflammation, adrenal fatigue potentially, reduced tolerance for other things and slower recovery, and more, right? It can lead to an inflammatory state that just collapses your body. So sometimes I think the most effective adjustment is not adding more, it's just simplifying. And this could look like shortening your sessions. You want to make sure you're doing the minimum, but if you're working on a 20-minute protocol that's between 5 and 20 minutes, go down to 5, right? If you're doing vagus nerve more often for longer sessions, maybe you need to go back to the 3 to 4 times a day, right? Fewer variables can be important here as well. And just focusing more on calming inputs. Sometimes if I'm stressed, even just using 7 to 12 hertz over my arms with a brush electrode can actually be very, very powerful for calming me down. And working on less intense protocols. And this doesn't necessarily mean microcurrent, but something like 3 pathways can be incredibly draining. And maybe your body is not capable of handling that at the moment. But also diets, right? Sometimes people go on extreme diets or extreme physical exercise routines. Calm that down too. And this will allow you to have some recovery time that you need. It's not a step back, it's just pacing things properly. So, one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is, what does my system need to feel safe right now? And sometimes that means taking a break. Now, this goes counter to being consistent, but it's important to look at this as well because there are times, right, when a person maybe needs to take a step back. This is one of the things, again, I'm going to push you guys to talk to your treatment coordinators. If you're feeling like you're overwhelmed or your body's overwhelmed, we can adjust the protocol. We can do that with you. You don't have to do it yourself. When your nervous system feels safe, and even just adjusting that protocol is going to make you feel better, your inflammation will go down. And so then your healing pathways can activate and the body will become more responsive. So it's definitely important to balance emotional stress with your protocol. This is important, and we have to be responsive to that, right? Look at where your body is and see if we need to alter it. Now, the last question for today, what should I focus on most during this season to keep things moving forward? Well, spring is a transition season, and transitions require a different strategy than stable periods do. If I had to put 3 priorities on this is what I would focus on. First off, regulate your nervous system. This is always first, but this is even more important in spring because the body is adjusting to changes in light, shifts in temperature, increased metabolic activity, and often increased environmental load. I don't know what it's like where you guys are if you're listening here, but right now my car is yellow. It's usually white, but it's covered in pollen, right? This is an environmental load being placed upon everyone's bodies. If the system becomes overwhelmed during that transition, your symptoms are going to flare up. So the goal is to keep the nervous system as stable as possible. So sleep consistently. Work as best as you can to keep that consistent sleep pattern going. Reduce overstimulation. Have recovery time. Use calming practices regularly. Vagus nerve, alpha ear clips, grounding, things that help keep your body calm. When the system is calm, everything will improve. Your digestion, your immune function, your inflammation, your energy, these are all going to increase or decrease as you want them to. The next step is consistency over perfection. Okay. Spring often brings variability. Energy can fluctuate day by day, right? The sun's out, it's not, depending on where you live. Some places are getting a lot of it right now. Symptoms can shift. Motivations can change day by day. Some days you just don't want to go do things. This is not the time to aim to be perfect. It is the time to stay consistent with some key habits. You do not need the perfect protocol. You do not need the perfect schedule. You do not need perfect execution. You just need repeatable, sustainable actions, even if these are small, because ultimately consistency will build momentum and momentum will carry you through fluctuation, right? Then reduce your overall load. Spring is not the time to push harder. You need to be clear and recalibrate yourself. And this means working to reduce the total load on the system. So this includes lowering inflammatory inputs. Likely throughout the winter, you've maybe had a few cheat days with your diet. That's okay. But maybe you need to start reducing that now. There's already going to be more pressure on your body. Let's start to lower the things we put into our body that create inflammation. We're going to want to support detox pathways gently. Some elimination assistance, stimulating the lymphatic system. These are all good options. Try and stabilize your blood sugar as best as you can and work to simplify your routines as well. This way, you're creating space for your body to be able to adjust. It's meaning that when you have a shift, it's not going to throw you into fight or flight. There's really a lot to be said for just doing that alone. So if you're moving through spring right now, just remember you don't need to do more. You need to do what matters. Just do it consistently, do it calmly, be aware of yourself. There's nothing more powerful than a person that's aware of their own body. This is what will keep things moving forward. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's this. Change does not mean regression. It doesn't mean things are getting worse just because there is change. Spring is a season of movement. Your body is adjusting. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your energy is shifting. So just stay steady, stay consistent. And remember, healing is not about forcing progress. It's about creating the conditions where progress can actually happen. That is the key. So thank you so much for joining me for today's episode, everyone. I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and you're listening to Pain Free for Life.